Welcome to Into the Dark, true crime stories, where we shed light on unsolved cases that have haunted communities and investigators for years. In this series, we'll explore why the dissemination of stories regarding missing person cases or murders is crucial. The public consciousness is essential to keep these cases alive, as it can potentially result in new information or leads that may facilitate their resolution. We'll also examine how sharing these stories can help draw attention to more pressing issues, like better support mechanisms for families and more effective investigative strategies. Through this journey, we'll commemorate the victims and keep their memory alive. It's particularly crucial when justice is not attained. Ultimately, our aim is to raise awareness about the frequency of these occurrences and the significance of continuing efforts toward their resolution. So let's explore the mysteries of the shadows and venture deeper into the dark. Join me, Nix, and our fellow Fireflies as we shine a light on these perplexing and unresolved cases.
The mysterious murder of Mary Rogers. In 1841, Mary Cecilia Rogers was discovered dead in the Hudson River, and her case quickly became a national sensation. Rogers, born circa 1820, was a renowned beauty who worked at a tobacco store in New York, where her presence drew the attention of many prominent men. Her case inspired Edgar Allan Poe's seminal detective story, The Mystery of Marie Rogers. Join us as we delve into the perplexing case of Mary Cecilia Rogers and explore the various theories surrounding her tragic and untimely death. Mary Rogers, a beautiful young woman, was the talk of the neighborhood in Lyme, Connecticut. As the only child of her widowed mother, she lived in their boarding house and captured the attention of many with her stunning looks. When her father passed away in a steamboat explosion, Mary took a job as a clerk in a tobacco shop owned by John Anderson in New York City. Anderson paid her generously due to her physical attractiveness, which drew in many customers, including literary figures James Fenimore Cooper, Washington Irving, and Fitz Greene Halleck. One customer even wrote a poem in the New York Herald about her heavenly smile and star-like eyes. Despite her popularity, tragedy befell Mary, and her story continues to captivate people to this day. In 1838, the disappearance of Miss Mary Cecilia Rogers made headlines in the Sun newspaper. Her mother, Phoebe, claimed to have found a suicide note, which the coroner analyzed and determined to reveal a fixed and unalterable determination to destroy herself. However, the Times and Commercial Intelligence reported the next day that the disappearance was a hoax, and Rogers had only gone to visit a friend in Brooklyn. Some believe the return was the actual hoax, as Rogers failed to return to work immediately. Rogers' reappearance fueled speculation that the entire event was a publicity stunt orchestrated by John Anderson, the owner of the tobacco shop where she worked. The controversy was fueled by the Sun's prior publication of the Great Moon Hoax in 1835. Despite the conflicting reports, the strange events surrounding Mary Cecilia Rogers' disappearance remain a mystery to this day. On July 25, 1841, Mary Cecilia Rogers informed her fiancé, Daniel Payne, that she would be visiting her aunt and other family members. However, just 3 days later, on July 28th, her lifeless body was discovered floating in the Hudson River in Hoboken, New Jersey. Mary, who was popularly known as the Beautiful Cigar Girl, became the subject of sensational media attention and national intrigue, as the circumstances of her death suggested murder or a failed abortion attempt. Despite the ongoing inquest, the case remained unsolved, and 9 weeks later, media attention waned with the emergence of an unrelated murder case. However, in November 1842, Frederica Loss came forward and swore that Mary's death was a result of a failed abortion attempt. Although police dismissed the claim, it remains an unsolved mystery to this day. The case highlighted the shortcomings of the law enforcement system in New York City during that era. The archaic force, comprising one night watch, 100 city marshals, 31 constables, and 51 police officers, was shown to be inept and corrupt, with the media emphasizing this fact in their reporting of the case. Additionally, the tragic loss of Mary Cecilia Rogers and her fiancé Daniel Payne, who committed suicide due to his grief over her death, served as a cautionary tale about the risks of unplanned pregnancies and the dangers of the abortion procedures in that era. The case of Mary Cecilia Rogers remains one of the most mysterious and infamous unsolved mysteries in American history. The circumstances surrounding her death, the failure of the law enforcement system, and the media frenzy surrounding the case are reminders of the importance of effective and efficient law enforcement and the need for responsible reproductive health care. Our next case pertains to the rape and murder of Gail F. Schaller, a 35-year-old mother from Piscataway, NJ, who was carjacked from the Middlesex shopping mall in South Plainfield, NJ in 1992. Gail was one of the first people in New Jersey to fall victim to carjacking, a crime that had only recently surfaced in the United States. The first known case of carjacking in the U.S. had taken place just a year prior to Gail's tragic death in Detroit, with the murder of Ruth Wall. In the fall of 1992, the town of Piscataway, New Jersey, was rocked by a horrific crime that would forever change the community. On November 3rd, Gail Schaller, a 35-year-old mother of three, had been shopping at a mall in South Plainfield with her young daughter Andrea. As they left the mall and made their way to their car, they were approached from behind by a man later identified as Scott Johnson. Johnson, just 23 years old at the time, grabbed Gail by the hair and held a knife to her throat. He forced her to drive around for 2 hours while her daughter watched helplessly from the backseat. Eventually, Johnson dropped Andrea off at a daycare center in Piscataway and left her there alone and scared. The next morning, 2 daycare workers found Andrea crying outside and called the police. But Gail was nowhere to be found. 4 days later, her partially nude body was discovered in a drainage ditch at a nearby lumber company. She had been raped and murdered with over 40 stab wounds. The police soon discovered that the Schaller family's minivan had been found a few miles from the mall, and that a palm print, fingerprints, and other forensic evidence had been recovered from the vehicle. All of the evidence pointed to one man: Scott Johnson. Johnson, a Plainfield, NJ resident, was questioned by police outside his home on November 6th. He had a large bandage over a cut on his right hand, which he explained as happening while he was washing dishes. But when police found a kitchen knife with Gail's blood on it in the backyard of Johnson's girlfriend's home, they knew they had their suspect. Johnson was arrested on November 8th and charged with 13 counts, including carjacking, rape, and murder. His trial began in January of 1995, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. The jury found him guilty on all counts, but when it came time to decide on the death penalty, they were unable to reach a unanimous decision. On May 8th, Johnson was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 30 years before he would be eligible for parole for Gail's murder. He was also given a consecutive 100-year sentence with a minimum of 50 years before parole eligibility for the other crimes. Johnson appealed his sentence, but on March 9, 1998, the appeals court affirmed both his conviction and sentence. The tragic events surrounding Gail Schaller's carjacking, rape, and murder had a profound impact on the Piscataway community and the nation as a whole. Carjacking became a household word, and new laws were drafted to deal more severely with this type of crime. While justice was served in the end, the memory of Gail Schaller's life and the brutal way it was taken will never be forgotten. Susan Walsh was a talented writer and journalist who disappeared from her home in Nutley, New Jersey on July 16, 1996. Her disappearance sparked a media frenzy that lasted well into the late 1990s, with several newspapers and media outlets speculating that her investigation into the Russian mafia, or New York City's underground vampire community, might have led to her disappearance. These subjects were ones that she had written about extensively for the Village Voice. Despite the intense media attention and numerous investigations, no trace of Walsh has ever been found. Her case has been featured on multiple television programs, including Unsolved Mysteries in 1997 and Disappeared in 2012. The 1998 book Piercing the Darkness, Undercover with Vampires in America Today by Katherine Ramsland, is also devoted to Walsh's disappearance and the investigation into the underground vampire community. Today, more than 2 decades after her disappearance, the case of Susan Walsh remains unsolved, leaving her family and friends to wonder what happened to her on that fateful summer day. On the morning of July 16, 1996, Susan Walsh, a 36-year-old mother of 2 from Nutley, New Jersey, left her home to go to work. She was employed as a stockbroker at Smith Barney in New York City. However, Susan never arrived at her office that day and has not been seen or heard from since. The day after her disappearance, Susan's car was found abandoned in a parking lot at the Essex County Airport in Fairfield, New Jersey. The car was unlocked, and her purse was found on the front seat. However, her keys and cellular phone were missing. The investigation into her disappearance began immediately, but there were few leads to follow. Susan's family and friends were in shock and devastated by her disappearance. They described her as a loving mother and devoted wife who was deeply committed to her career. Susan's husband, Richard Walsh, was also a stockbroker and worked at the same firm as his wife. He was initially questioned by the police, but was later cleared of any involvement in her disappearance. Despite an extensive investigation, there was little progress in the case, and it eventually went cold. However, Susan's family and friends never gave up hope and continued to search for her. They distributed flyers, held vigils, and even appeared on national television to bring attention to the case. In 2013, the case was reopened by the Nutley Police Department, and new leads were investigated. A search of a wooded area near the Essex County Airport was conducted, but nothing was found. The investigation revealed that Susan had been having marital problems, and that her husband had filed for divorce 2 weeks before her disappearance. However, he maintained his innocence and denied any involvement in her disappearance. In 2018, a new development occurred in the case. The Nutley Police Department announced that they had identified a person of interest in the case. The individual was not named, but it was revealed that they had a connection to Susan and that they had been interviewed by the police in the past. The investigation into this person is ongoing, and it is unclear if they will ever be charged in connection with Susan's disappearance. Despite the passage of time, Susan's family and friends continue to hold out hope that she will be found. Her 2 children have grown up without their mother and still search for answers. The Nutley Police Department continues to investigate the case and urges anyone with information to come forward. The disappearance of Susan Walsh is a tragic and baffling case that has haunted her family and friends for decades. It is a reminder that even in a world of advanced technology and sophisticated law enforcement, some cases remain unsolved. Susan Walsh's family deserves answers and closure, and it is hoped that someday they will be able to find them. As we come to the end of today's episode, we are reminded that these cases represent a sobering reality that we must confront. While the victims may never receive the justice they deserve, it is important that we continue to investigate and bring awareness to their stories. We cannot forget the many others out there who are still seeking justice. Let us remain diligent in our efforts to make the world a safer place for all. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe. Farewell.